way approach seeks genuine autonomy. And I'm curious if you think, what you think the prospects are for meaningful engagement on the part of the Chinese government.
We do have some kind of a back channel, but it's not worth, if you look at what President Xi Jinping is doing to Tibet today, from 2009 to 2022, 157 Tibetans have self-immolated inside Tibet. And most of them are between the age of 17 to 35. They have never witnessed independent Tibet. They have never witnessed the 10 long years of cultural revolution when the Communist Chinese government destroyed some 6,000 Tibetan monasteries and 1.2 million Tibetans died as a direct or indirect result of China's occupation. Now even today, the whole policy is based on if there are no nationalities, then there won't be nationality issues. So what they do is they strike at the very root of our identity. That's the language, religion, and culture. So Chinese government has established these colonial-style boarding schools wherein there are about 1 million Tibetan children put in these boarding schools away from their family, away from their culture, away from their language. You are taught only Mandarin, loyalty to the Communist Party. So this is going to be very, very consequential if this continues for another 2-3 decades down the line for the Tibetans, because one whole generation of Tibetans would be turned into Chinese. So when you tell that to the Chinese government, then they respond, oh, how did the Americans treat their natives? Or how did the Canadians with the First Nations, or the Australians with the Aboriginals and the Torres Strait Islanders, or the New Zealanders with the Maoris, and even Sami people in the Scandinavia. So they know what these countries did was wrong, and these countries also recognize what they did was wrong and trying to make up for the historical wrongs. The Chinese government is knowingly, deliberately doing it to the Tibetans. With the Chinese government, I only say, because His Holiness adopted this middle way policy. And His Holiness always appreciated the larger interests of humanity. And His Holiness always appreciated the concept of European Union. And His Holiness used to say that if it had not been for the concept of European Union, Europeans would still be fighting and killing each other. So if that can be applied to Europe, then why not Tibet with China? Because we lived with the Chinese people, we lived with Nepalese, Bhutanese, Indians, Uyghurs, Mongols for centuries in peace. There have been very few wars. So whenever we get to go back, we have to live with Chinese, with Nepalese, Indians as neighbors. So if we have to live as neighbors, then why don't we live in peace with each other? You know, why you end up fighting with each other all the time? So that is His Holiness' vision, to find a negotiated, mutually beneficial, because Tibet is landlocked and it's huge. It's 1/4 of China's land size. You know, China is 9.7 million square kilometers. Tibet is about 2.5 million square kilometers. It's a little bigger than Mexico as a country. So it has its geopolitical importance, it has its environmental importance, and most importantly, it has its Buddhist values, which is based on non-violence and compassion. So when His Holiness says middle, then there has to be ends to it. So the middle way is not gaining as much traction as possible because the Chinese leaders are not sensible enough. That's why sometimes I jokingly say, if you have good hospitals here, we'll bring one Chinese leader after another, do brain surgery and put common sense and send them back. That's all they need. They don't need anything else. Because His Holiness is not asking for independence, because sovereignty is a major concern of the Chinese government. We have addressed that. But still, they keep calling His Holiness a separatist. Now they call me also a separatist. So I keep sending back messages. Who really wants Tibet to be separated from China? Is it His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or the Chinese government, despite His Holiness' willingness and commitment to the middle way, keeps calling him a separatist, separatist, separatist? So it's the Chinese government who wants Tibet to be separated from China. And they're still worried about Tibet being separated from China. So if that is the case, then they should be working more closely with His Holiness, who's addressing all these problems. So as a political leader now, we decided to focus on the ends. And one end is the historical status of Tibet as an independent state. Tibet has always been an independent state, not directly run by any government, including China. And the other one is the current situation of occupied Tibet under the repressive Chinese government. So we are trying to find a middle way where we can have the freedom to protect our language, to preserve our culture, our religion, practice our religion, and more importantly, to protect our environment. Because Tibet's environment is not only important for Tibet, it's important to the whole world.
You have called for a number of times is for the PRC to invite His Holiness to China on a pilgrimage without preconditions. Is that something that you can see happening in the coming years?
Chinese government always says that we are open to dialogue, but they are not open at all. They are the most opaque government in this world. And they have also said His Holiness is free to come back. Again, the condition is for good. And His Holiness keeps saying, if I get the opportunity to go to China and Tibet, I will go. But I will not live there because there is no freedom there. So that has been His Holiness' position. And there is no religious freedom at all in Tibet. Even then, the Chinese government wants to be responsible for the recognition of reincarnated lamas, or what they call as living Buddhas. So they have laid a law as far back as 2007 called the Order Number 5. The Chinese state will be responsible for recognition of the reincarnated lamas, which is totally aimed at the next Dalai Lama. So they have three positions. One is that the Dalai Lama should be born within China, and that they will look for Dalai Lama's reincarnation within China. So the government, a government that does not believe in any religion, wants to control the yet-to-come Dalai Lama. They are not concerned about the living Dalai Lama. They know that if they can control the 15th Dalai Lama, then they can control Tibet and Tibetan people. So His Holiness' response is, I'll be born in a free world. The whole idea of reincarnation is to carry forward the responsibility of the previous Lama. So the next Lama should have the freedom to carry forward that responsibility. The second position of the Chinese government is that by tradition, the Dalai Lama has to be chosen through a golden urn. And that is supposed to have been introduced in 1793 during the Qing dynasty, when there was some influence over the Tibetans, or Tibet. Because Qing were more powerful between 1735 to 1795. So my response to all this is, before 1793, there have been 8 Dalai Lamas who have been chosen through the real traditional Buddhist traditional means. So does the Chinese government to say that the 8 Dalai Lamas before that were not Dalai Lamas? In that case, there cannot be a 9th Dalai Lama also. So if the golden urn was supposed to have been introduced in 1793, it should have been used during the 9th Dalai Lama, because that was immediately after that. It was not used. Lately, we found by 1995, they used the golden urn to choose the 11th Panchen Lama, which was again manipulated. And the Panchen Lama, recognized by His Holiness Dalai Lama, we still don't know whether he's alive or not. There have been a lot of inquiries from the international community, but China does not respond to all these questions. Then the third thing is, the Chinese government says that lamas should be recognized by the state. So His Holiness responds to this. His Holiness always has very wise and humorous response to all difficult questions. So His Holiness says, if Chinese government is really serious about reincarnation, then they should study Buddhism first and believe in the concept of rebirth, life after death. If they are still more serious, they should look for Mao Zedong's reincarnation first. He's no more with us. And Deng Xiaoping's reincarnation second. Now even Jiang Zemin is not with us, so they should look for these 3 because they like to be worshipped. Then maybe the Dalai Lama. That is how His Holiness responds to all these difficult questions. And Chinese government is on very thin ice when it comes to all this history or with reincarnation issues.
Earlier this year, of course, His Holiness laid out his own succession plan, and he noted just as you did, that his successor will be born in a free country, that only the Gaden Phudrong Trust will be responsible for choosing the next Dalai Lama. And he actually mentioned that the next Dalai Lama could be a woman as well, which I think was interesting. Notably, if you could talk to us about the protections that will be in place to see to it that the PRC isn't able to interfere in the process the way they did with the Panchen Lama.
The only one document that is available on His Holiness Reincarnation is a September 2011 document, where His Holiness says that when I reach the age of 90, then I would make a statement, which he did on 2nd of July this year, just before his 90th birthday on July 16th. His Holiness has responded to his reincarnation depending on who's asking the questions. As you said, when he's asked whether the 15th Dalai Lama could be a woman, His Holiness says, why not? Because women, and especially mothers, have a natural compassionate tendency towards their children. And when His Holiness is asked whether it could be an emanation, which means appointing somebody as your successor before your death, His Holiness says that is also possible because it had happened in Tibet before. Sometimes His Holiness even said that I could be the last Dalai Lama because His Holiness says it's good to end on a high note. This 14th Dalai Lama did well, at least in this world. So His Holiness has responded in different ways, but one thing that has been very consistent since 1968 was that His Holiness always said whether there should be a next Dalai Lama or not will be decided by the Tibetan people. So what we have been doing over the last years is the declarations from the Religious Council. We hold a council of Tibetan religious Buddhist leaders every 3 to 5 years. Because the first community that gets impacted is the Tibetan community. Tibetans inside don't have the freedom to speak, but they do send messages out about what they want. And then, of course, there are the Tibetan Buddhist world in the Himalayas and Mongolia, and, in Russian republics of Kalmykia, Tuva, Buryat. Then again, there is the larger Buddhist world, not just the Pali tradition, the Sanskrit tradition that we follow, the Tibetan Buddhists follow. There is also the Pali tradition that Buddhists in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, Brunei, Singapore. There are a lot of Buddhists in these regions. And for the first time, on September 18th, 19th of this year, Buddhist leaders from 12 countries of this region came to Dharamsala, offered His Holiness a long life prayer, and conferred His Holiness the title Supreme Patriarch of the Buddhist world. So there is now a lot more recognition on that. So what His Holiness confirmed on 2nd July, which was very important for Tibetans, is that the Gaden Phudrong Trust of His Holiness, which is the management of the private office of His Holiness Dalai Lama, will continue. And the lineage of the Dalai Lama will continue. So these two got confirmed, which means there would be a next Dalai Lama. I keep visiting DC very often. In the State Department, one very senior person asked me, "Oh, you don't seem to have a process in place." I said, "That's your perspective." But what we believe is that if there is one thing that China cannot handle is unpredictability. So His Holiness has even now not confirmed whether it's going to be an emanation or reincarnation, but he has confirmed that the lineage will continue, that there will be a next Dalai Lama, and it's still too early. His Holiness keeps saying that I will live for another 2 more decades, 2 decades and more. And from this Tibetan New Year, His Holiness says, I'll live up to 130 years of age. So there are propitious pre-signs that this Dalai Lama will live very long. So I keep telling the Chinese, this message is for you.